This exhibition is all about that insider-outsider relationship, but of course the photographers in it are along a spectrum of relationships. And on that spectrum, Danny Lyon is definitely the most insider of all the projects in this gallery. Lyon was a graduate student up at the University of Chicago in history. He was already photographing at that time. He had gone down to the South to photograph civil rights protests and movements down there. And then he also was a motorcycle rider. And he actually said that he was those three things in a very specific order, which was he was a motorcycle rider, and then a photographer, and then a student at the time. And the first image he ever took for this series, called The Bike Riders, because that was the eventual book that came out of it, was the one on the side over here, which he took actually while he was in a car. So his friend and he were driving to a rally, which they would go to pretty regularly to ride, to watch other people ride. And the experience that a lot of us have had, a group of motorcyclists came up behind him and then around the car and then in front, and he sort of urged his friend on to catch up with them so he could take this picture through the windshield of them riding off into the distance. That started this project, which lasted for a few years, of Lyon photographing motorcyclists. He called them bike riders very specifically because he said that's what they called themselves. Bikers was a term that they associated with California and that came later, but at the time they were all bike riders. This is just a small selection of photographs from that project, but you can see the range of things that he photographed. He photographed them at these races and rallies that they did throughout the Midwest, in Illinois and Indiana especially. He photographed them in really private places like this clubhouse. Most people wouldn't have had access to this meeting at a bar of the Chicago Outlaws, which was the name of the group. But Lyon actually became a member of the Chicago Outlaws while he was doing this project, getting even closer to that sort of insider relationship. And then of course here are some photographs of riders with their jackets, which sort of denote who they are and what their membership is. And two friends of his, Cowboy and Sparky, over here on the far side. Lyon did this because he actually wanted to be an advocate for these men. He did not sort of maintain an attitude of neutrality with them. He didn't give over his project to someone else to edit, to commission, to sort of decide what got to be included. Lyon decided to publish a book so that he would have full editorial control over what images were in there and how they were portrayed. He did this because he thought that the mainstream media at the time, Life and Look magazines especially, he thought they misused photography to tell stories instead of represent reality. And Lyon was really interested in, he even said, glorifying these men and that he thought were so misunderstood. So he took pictures of them and reproduced them sort of as he wanted to. He also transcribed interviews that he recorded of them talking about their lives and included that in the book as a way to give these men their own voice to talk about their lives and who they were. So as I mentioned, Lyon was actually part of the outlaw motorcycle gang. They called themselves Outlaws because they were one of the groups that wasn't sort of officially registered with the American Motorcycle Association. That was actually really common at the time. The kinds of people who wanted to ride together didn't always go through the sort of bureaucratic processes of becoming an affiliated group. But of course, this is sort of what we consider the peak or the golden age of motorcycle groups. This book came out, The Bike Riders came out a year before Easy Rider, the movie. And very soon, towards the early 70s, motorcycle culture and the perception of it in the United States changed. We went from a sort of beat culture, open road lifestyle to something that was considered more sinister and more dangerous. So Lyon really, without knowing it, captured a culture that was about to go through a momentous shift and has served as not only a great photographic project, a book that has been reprinted 5 or 6 times because it's so popular, but also as a sort of elegy to what 60s bike rider culture was before we got into the political wars of the 1970s.